right.
Great.
So guys, we have literally 10 minutes with this very important gentleman because he's going to have to run to an airport. There's only one flight to go back to London today. He cannot miss it. So we're going to run through the content very quickly.
We're going to talk very fast.
Very, very fast. No, we'll try to be English nice, promise. So my name is Raph. I'm the CEO and founder of Startup Bootcamp IoT. We're an early stage investor. We look at a lot of companies, but it's not about me. It's about this gentleman today. So Dex, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone. My name is Torricke-Barton. I spent about a decade working in Silicon Valley. Previously, I was head of communications for Elon Musk. Before that for Mark Zuckerberg, and before that for Eric Schmidt. So I've spent a lot of time in big tech. I do a lot of communications for startups now. I'm based in London now because I'm a masochist. I moved back to the UK last year to get involved in politics.
Come on, don't kill it yet.
Yes, exactly. So out of the frying pan and into the fire.
There you go. Good introduction. So we have noted a few things that we wanted to talk about. Let's try to get straight to the point. Sure. So you introduced yourself, and you said you work quite a bit with the GAFAs. So everybody's familiar with GAFAs, I suppose, the big names, right? Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. Talk about a little bit the technology and the impact that you see going through. You've done a few presentations recently. I don't know if anyone checked those out, but an interesting point of view between impact and the views of politicians. Do you want to say a little bit about this?
Well, it's interesting because we're going through this moment where, particularly in Europe, there is a tremendous amount of fear being incited about the tech community. We're going through what people are calling the tech clash. And the critics of technology are, I think, overwhelmingly drawn from the incumbent industries that are being disrupted by tech. They are coming from traditional media organizations, and they're coming from governments and politicians. And I don't know about you, when I hear the average politician talking about technology, I just want to curl up under my table and die, because most of these politicians are just terrible. They talk about things like AI, and they have absolutely no idea what machine learning is. They talk about social networking, but they have absolutely no idea how a social network makes money. And these are the folks who are basically saying the tech industry is irresponsible and is not having a good impact on society. They have not taken the time to actually understand the enormous social and economic value that is being created by technologists. And I think that's why it's incredibly important for all of you as leaders in the tech community to be making the case for the kind of value you're creating and to really be communicating constantly and proactively to get that message out.
Great. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the politician impact, the fact that there's a lot of technology in the world. But it's not only about bad, it's also about good. And we talked a little bit about the emerging countries and the fact that there's a lot of good things that can be done with technology these days. What have you done recently that you can talk about, particularly in emerging countries? You've seen technologies, right, so that are very impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the truth is, in a lot of countries, the kind of technology that is really life-changing is very, very simple. So, I was in Kenya about 3 weeks ago doing some volunteering in a school in the Masai Mara in very rural Kenya. And the infrastructure is not great there. But a lot of folks love mobile banking. They're all doing banking with their phones. And the phones are very, very old-fashioned. They're not the latest iPhones or Androids or anything like that. Most of them aren't smartphones. But it is absolutely game-changing. It is key to building a local commerce infrastructure and local economies. A lot of the girls at the school I was volunteering at, they all want to go into careers like coding and science and healthcare. Sort of every third girl, at the school wanted to become a doctor or a nurse. And the only way that they're going to get access to those kinds of opportunities is through building a tech infrastructure and having access to connectivity. And actually, the charity I was working with, this amazing UK-based organization called Educating the Children, they are focused on building coding boot camps for girls in Uganda and Kenya so that more girls can actually go and join the knowledge economy. And those are the kinds of things that are really life-changing. They're very simple, obviously, compared to the things that we talk about at most events like this, but they really do make a difference.
Right. So I want to bring that back to Valencia a little bit, right? Because it's all good and nice to speak about the emerging countries, but I think those guys are interesting as well as what we can do for the ecosystem here and what are the lessons that you've seen that are relevant in other regions, particularly coming from the Silicon Valley, then coming to Europe, then you've seen emerging countries. there's a lot of other things that you can learn from. So any tricks and tips, things that you've seen that could be adapted here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things which are shaped more at the strategic level to go and build communities that become leaders in technology. You know, we were talking backstage about Singapore, you know, and how their government made a conscious decision to specialize in a very narrow set of areas, you know, things like biotechnology. And that's what allowed Singapore to really become known as a hub. That's less valuable, I think, for most people, because you know that really depends on government and you know top-level sort of strategic decisions. For all of you, the biggest thing that you can do to really shape that kind of environment and folks who are invested in shaping Valencia as a future tech hub, I think it's really about telling a story. And maybe this is the most trite advice, because communications guy tells you need more communications. Excellent idea. But the truth is, every community has a story to tell. And it's very, very important if you want to achieve cut-through versus other communities that are out there. People want to know why they should be based here versus London or Singapore or New York or San Francisco. And there are always local characteristics and strengths that are very different than those places. You know, and at a time when Britain's going through Brexit, and we're going through the Bay Area exodus in California. Lots of people are leaving because of the cost of living and the massive social challenges in those communities. Places like Valencia, which are livable, and you know, you have a beach, you know, literally these are the kinds of things that will actually convince people to say, I would actually much rather live there and work there, and it might be healthier for the culture of my organization and the kinds of talent I'll recruit, if actually I can stress that this is a place that is a real community, not just a place to work.
You're saying you're moving to Valencia, is that what you're saying?
I'd love to. I just live in airports.
Yes. So let's try to wrap this up a little bit, because I know you need to run to your airport, but we talked a lot about the technology. We talked a little bit about the bad view on the GAFAs and the bad view of the politicians, the positive impact that it can make. We talk about the refugee crisis. You briefly talked about this. Maybe there's a little bit more we can talk about this as well. And I'd love to close on sort of the lessons we just talked about in Valencia, but I'd love to close on the positive aspect of the coding, what you just mentioned too, right? So I think there's a lot there that is not only a good lesson, but a fantastic way to enable the next generations. So maybe we can close on that as a positive note on helping people to understand where we go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two very different worlds that are intersecting all the time at the moment. There's the technology world, and it's rooms full of people like this who are building extraordinary things. And then there's a governmental and a political world. And there are rooms full of people focused on social and economic challenges and crises, things like the refugee crisis. And the two sides very often don't talk to each other. And that's exactly why you have people building amazing apps which may not necessarily be having the greatest impact on people's lives. And that's exactly why you have politicians who can attack tech and say, why aren't you helping to solve the refugee crisis or dealing with war or hunger or poverty? And the truth is there's plenty of people on both sides who are doing great things, but we need people generally to talk to each other much more. And you know, actually the refugee crisis, I think, turned into an amazing moment for the tech community, not because it's a great moment for the world, but because in spite of all the horror and the tragedy of what happened, you had people from all over the tech community in Europe and around the world rallying to go and try and build things that would actually make a difference. And you know, the Tech.fugees movement, which was largely driven out of Europe, has had a huge difference. You know, I went to volunteer in Greece a couple of years ago, and the number one question that I would very get often asked by refugees when they were arriving on shore, you know, after crossing the Mediterranean, was, what's the Wi-Fi password? They wanted to know how to get connected before they were getting access to blankets or food or anything else. Because the first thing that refugees wanted to do was to tell their friends and family back home that they'd made it safely to Europe. And that was just one example for me of how powerful connectivity is and why exactly we need to go and build services and tools that can go and help people in really desperate circumstances. So I think we can do a lot more like that. And I think anyone who's building a valuable service should also think, who are the people who are most in need? Because your products and your services will probably have an absolutely disproportionate impact on their quality of life. You don't want to build apps that, you know, just help people, you know, like me or folks who've worked in Silicon Valley for a long time. You want to really help people who have yet to even experience the magic and the value of technology. So I'm excited to see what all of you build.
Thank you very much, guys. You've officially seen the fastest panel in the history of panels, but I hope this was still useful. Thanks very much for that time. And if you need the password of the Wi-Fi, we're not refugees, but we still need that. Let us know. Thanks very much, guys. Have a good day.